Good morning and happy free Arrow Day to all my VE Arrow holders out there. This is The Node, your place for news, interviews, and education. I am Mike, aka Veteran Crypto, and with me as always, late is David. He'll be here in a minute, I'm sure. But until then, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the socials. So, if you want to join the conversation, like Ellie was talking about in the chat, come on over to YouTube and you can find us at the Node Network, all one word, no spaces, and you can join the conversation. You can ask questions, you can tell us we're full of shit, whatever it is that you want to say in the chat. We welcome all points of view here. We are not locked into one way of thinking. We are not an echo chamber. If you have good quality info to give out and you want us to talk about it on stream, let us know. If we're kind of giving information about a project that is wrong, please by all means correct us. We are first and foremost, we want to make sure that the information we're giving out is accurate and true. There's no egos here. So, with that being said, if you want to follow us on X, you can find us at the Node_network. The Node network, all one word, was already taken, so I had to add an underscore. So if we're starting out on a base note, today, it's Democrats always talking about calling everything fascism. I don't think that word means what you think it means. If you've watched The Princess Bride, funny movie. And then of course the node of the node. So this is everything that we offer. So this is anything that's that we give out at no cost. Anything that we charge for. Information. Our programming, our shows, our community coaching, newsletter, our merch. Hats, sweaters, all that kind of stuff. It's all here. So if you want to find anything and everything that has to do with our brand, you're going to find it at the node.pro. So if you can see on the homepage, you can find just really quick. You can find the newsletter. It's $20 a month. Once we get that dialed in, don't buy that yet until we let you know that it's dialed in properly. You can schedule a no cost initial consultation with David for his coaching. You can click this button, and I haven't. This is new. He just launched it last night, but I believe that this button will take you to where you will be able to figure out where in our no-cost university, DeFi University, where you'll start based off your current knowledge and where you're at in your journey. And then of course the shop, where you can buy the hats, the hoodies, the glasses, the thermoses, all that kind of stuff, and help support the channel if you so desire. It's definitely here. We want to stress we appreciate the people that support the channel. When you show up, you're in the chat, you're hitting the like button, hitting the follow button, you're sharing out the stream. That is the most important thing to us. If you want to go above and beyond and you find value in any of the stuff that we offer, absolutely. We greatly appreciate the support. But if you could, smash the like it owes you money. If you want to, let's actually go back to here. If you want to go to programming, so this is the calendar, the weekly calendar. So you can see we are truly a network. We have the Node Daily Show. We have the daily market wrap that David does, both of them Monday through Friday. We have twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. We have Crypto and Chill. On Thursday evenings, we have Red Pill. That's our based show. On Wednesdays and Sundays, sometimes we have Gaming and Chill. And then, of course, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, David does his paid live calls. So those are calls that are roundtables, video calls with the community. People that pay $99 a month for the service, and it's where successful people that have gone through the courses, they're successful DeFi investors. They want that sense of community to help them out, mentorship, things like that. And they share different things that they're finding, new protocols, that new advanced strategies in DeFi, all those sorts of things, and how it's working out for them. So Sometimes they're sharing things that they tried that didn't work. And so, maybe it will prevent you from making the same mistake. Sometimes they're sharing things that are highly profitable and you can, mirror those things. So that I can't stress enough the value of a good solid community. So if you want a no cost community, you have our Discord. We're always in there, happy to help with simple questions. If you want to take it to the next level, that's where that community comes in. Courses. If you're a beginner, if you want to come to the courses, click on beginner, intermediate, advanced. It will fast forward you to that spot in DeFi University. It is one of the best structured courses that I've found, paid or otherwise. And we don't charge for it at all. There's no gimmicks, there's no catches. Just sign up and go through the course. Again, the community, you can join the school community. That's the $99 a month. For those calls, you can join the no-cost Discord. And then there is a channel in the Discord and a channel, paid channel on YouTube, where you can join that DeFi University school call. So it's basically going to be simulcast to all three places at the same time. So whichever one that you prefer to join on, if you want that that service. Again, the coaching. This is what he does live with Ellie on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you want a no cost assessment, schedule a call with David, and he will sit down with you and figure out what's your strategy. What is your goals? What is your risk tolerance? What type of liquidity are you working with? What is it that you're trying to accomplish, and where are you at knowledge wise? He very well might say, you're not ready for this yet. Go through DeFi University, learn the basics, and then come back to me, and we'll accelerate you and get you to where you need to be. So
think about it. Think about it this way, Mike. So if someone is just getting started, let's say, and they haven't gone through any educational material yet, is it really the best use of their time to spend sessions working with me where I'm just walking them through beginner basics? It might not be the best use of their time.
No.
So, usually it's best to have some type of a foundation first and really understand what it is that you want to achieve. And then maybe there's a fit. So,
yeah, I mean, if you don't understand how to onboard fiat, how to use hot wallets and cold wallets, if you don't know what a hot wallet, the difference between a hot wallet and a cold wallet is, you need to know the basics. Otherwise, you're paying for a coaching service, and like David was just talking about, you're wasting your time learning the basics when you could be doing that at no cost. You want to make the most of that time that you're getting, that one-on-one time that you're getting with your coach, your mentor. So that's why we stress that so much, is use what we offer, at no cost to get up to speed, to get that foundation built. And then the newsletter. So once David gives the okay that this is dialed in, but until then, if you want to use the preview, if you want to come here, put in your email and generate a preview, you can see it just generates it real quick, and bing, bang, boom, there you go. And you
let's see, Mike, you want to go through the newsletter real quick and just see what did it generate today? What was the headline story?
All right.
I'm kind of curious. If you scroll up to the top there, just a little bit higher. Yeah, there we go. What's the headline story?
So you got the fear and greed index slumped to 42 as risk appetite evaporated ahead of today's critical U.S. PPI inflation release. U.S. spot ETFs suffered a brutal session, with BTC shedding 233.2 million and ETH bleeding an even heavier 261 million. Traders remain sidelined until U.S. PPI print confirms whether sticky inflation will further delay Fed rate cuts. So that's what initially it came out with. It gives you the ETF, Bitcoin, and ETH inflows and outflows. It gives you the current price with links to verify. It gives you the support and resistance ranges. So if you want to get into liquidity pools, if you want to do trading, and with stop losses and things like that, that's where that data comes in, and a little bit about each asset, and what's going on with it, what's making it move the way that it's moving. You got your on-chain metrics.
So this is actually really valuable. So the way that I built this thing out is there's like I call it a dozen different sources of data or so that I pull from their APIs, and then I use Gemini to basically like as the brain. So Gemini is going to pull from all these different APIs and turn it into a nice looking report like this. The report is generated every day. I think I set it to generate at like 6 in the morning Eastern. And then it gets sent out at 9:15 Eastern, which is right before the equity indexes open. But these data right here, this is actually really valuable stuff. So where is this pulling from? I think this is the CoinGlass API, the on-chain stuff.
There's CoinGlass and CryptoQuant. And so for Bitcoin, the whale flow, it says a 2013 dormant whale moved 500 BTC or $40 million. And another early holder transferred 1,000 BTC to Binance, while large holders have broadly stacked 270,000 BTC over the past month. So this is just giving stuff that you would have to scrub the internet for, like what I used to do for our newsletter for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and that's after I was dialed in. I had all my sources that I would use bookmarked, and I just had to piece it together. This in a couple of seconds generates a better quality newsletter than I was able to do manually in an hour and a half. So basically 66 cents a day, you're able to, generate this thing. And I used to say, because it used to take a minute. It used to take about 4 or 5 minutes. I was like, you can go get a cup of coffee, hit generate, go get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, come back, and it'll be ready. Now, you need to bring your cup of tea or coffee because it's going to generate, that fast. And it's going to give you good data. And also, always so important, is give you links to verify that data for yourself.
Right.
Always, always, always verify. Do not
verify, don't trust.
At face value. Do not take hype at face value. You have to remove emotion, and whatever decisions you make need to be based on data, on hard facts and information. I cannot stress that enough. ETF spot flows. So, again, this just gets more in depth, as far as what's going on with the different ETFs. We might have to add Canton now that it has an ETF. We might need to add Canton to that.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
Derivatives, so it's going to give you a bunch of data on derivatives, the catalysts. So this is, basically what's going on with, in the news.
That's important. Can you read some of those, Mike? Like what stands out to you when you're looking at that?
So the first one, in the past 24 hours, U.S. April Producer Price Index, the PPI release, Apple, the Q2 dividend payout, Senate Banking Committee expected Clarity Act markup. And again, this has hyperlinks, if you're wanting to read more. If some of these you might just be like, hey, I'm not invested in Apple, I don't care. But you might be interested in the Clarity Act. You can click on the hyperlink and it will take you to the actual news article and give you more detail. Expiration of Fed Chair Jerome Powell's term. So, this is something that we've been reporting and everybody's been reporting on, is, that he's, exiting that position, but he's staying on as like in
a partisan hack.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we'll get into a little bit of, kind of the partisanship and, politicians.
And Mike, by the way, PPI, I was just reading, as Bitcoin is selling off a little bit here today, PPI came in super hot. Super hot. Yeah.
That sticky inflation, I guess.
It's re-accelerating to the upside again.
I do that. It's things are going to get bad if things keep getting more and more expensive and people's wages aren't going up. You can look at all the data, the credit card debt, just everything. It's people are struggling and it potentially is about to get a lot worse. The SEC Q1 2026 Form 13F filing deadline. Institutional 13F filings for Q1 2026 will reveal the precise extent of bank and hedge fund accumulation of the U.S. spot Bitcoin ETFs.
Right.
So this is the official report that that has to be filed to the SEC. So this this isn't speculation. This isn't guesswork. This is the stuff that they're filing officially with the U.S. government, potentially offsetting the recent outflows and improving the fear and greed index from 42. And then the big story. So hot CPI print sparks institutional de-risking across digital assets, gives you a rundown, what happened, why it matters, and the so what.
This is actually really good, man. This is really good. We could use this for the news,
No, we could. I just don't want to give it, if once we start charging for it, I just don't want to give it away for free.
Right,
So.
right. Yeah. So the thing on the website, I think what we'll have to do is like gate most of the sections.
Yeah, absolutely. The counter argument, the primary bullish counter argument posts that the CPI spike is a localized anomaly driven entirely by transient geopolitical energy shocks rather than systemic resurgence in consumer demand. I don't know if I agree with that. If forward-looking housing data finally rolls over or incoming producer side metrics soften, the current sell-off may prove to be a severe overreaction in this scenario. The massive institutional exit from Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs simply resets the board, providing a deeply discounted entry point for sidelined capital once the higher for longer panic subsides.
Well, it needs to subside first, though, because PPI came in ridiculously hot today.
Yeah. And then you got the quick hits. So, the big story, the flows, the catalysts, and then our take. So it will give you, what we see going on in the markets currently, what we see happening. And, I'm going to read this real quick.
Yeah.
So the node take, risk off sentiment is pushing digital assets today as the fear and greed index settles at 42, in fear, fueled by a staggering outflow of 233 million from U.S. spot Bitcoin ETFs that saw FBTC shed 86 million and ARK-B lose 85 million. Ethereum fared similarly, bleeding 261 million in a single day. ETF exits as spot ETH prices slumped to 2,300, severely diverging from the S&P 500's modest climb to 7,412. However, derivatives markets are aggressively loading up for a move, with Bitcoin open interest swelling positive 5.47% to 57.54 billion, despite the negative price action signaling a heavy accumulation of short positions. This setup creates a powder keg of liquidity that will likely detonate based on how incoming wholesale inflation metrics price into the dollar. So over the next 12 hours, monitor the U.S. PPI release to see if sticky inflation reinforces a hawkish Fed trajectory, which could drive the DXY past its current 98.37 baseline. The next 24 hours, expect intense headline sensitivity on May 14th as the Senate Banking Committee reportedly marks up the Clarity Act, which we'll get into here in a minute, a structural event that could formally enshrine commodity status for Bitcoin and Ethereum. In the next 72 hours, brace for immense macro repositioning on May 15th, surrounding the expiration of Fed Chair Jerome Powell's current term, serving as a definitive policy pivot point for global risk assets. This is all spot on.
It's really valuable information. We can definitely use this as our source of news. The thing too, President Trump is going to be in China, in China pretty soon.
He already is.
He is. Yeah. He's meeting with
I
Xi.
saw a video of him landing and all the little Chinese people waving little flags.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So he's going to have a conversation with our nemesis, I guess you could say, because the Chinese Communist Party is not a friend. So yeah, that's hopefully going to be uneventful, because all the attempts on his life, if there's something horrible that happens in China, it's like China. Yeah. So we'll see. There will definitely be headlines coming from that, and they could be market moving. So we'll see what happens there. I don't really know what to expect from the meeting, to be completely honest. Like, what have you read, if anything? I haven't read much.
I honestly, I haven't dived into that. I've been focusing mostly on this morning on this. So here's a list of the amendments that will be voted on for the committee session on the Clarity Act. 40 of them, so I guess out of like 300, or no, more than 100. 40 of them are from Elizabeth Warren, basically the mouthpiece. Basically the mouthpiece of the banking system.
Wait. So here, Mike, before you tell me what the Elizabeth Warren amendments are, let me just guess what they are. They have to do with Trump, okay? And they have to do with ethics. It must be like, we're going to make sure that government officials cannot profit from digital assets or anything like that.
I didn't see, we'll go through them if you want. I didn't see any from her on that. I know that there was some from some other politicians. Hers are almost exclusively, and it's obvious that she's doing the bidding of her masters in the banking cartels, because she is the one that was using Gary Gensler for all those years, at the SEC.
They called it enforcement by action, which meant, let's criminalize builders and let's start going after people with criminal complaints through the SEC. And that was enforcement by action. That was their whole thing with that choke point 2.0, choke point 1.0. That was all Elizabeth Warren's doing.
Well, she was like revealed as, they caught her emailing Gary Gensler before, because she, was creating this illusion that she was, calling him to the carpet for a hearing, and was, supposedly going to grill him over his handling of, crypto and things like that, and how he needs to crack down more on it. And they caught her. It got leaked that she emailed him ahead of time all the questions. It was like, hey, just want to give you these ahead of time for your review. Let if your input on any of them that we should change. So it was all theater. She if she wasn't so inept, she has no integrity, and that goes back to when before she even got into politics, when she got a job at Harvard by claiming that she was Native American.
Pocahontas. Yeah, that's right.
By claiming she was Native American, and then it ended up taking a DNA and me test, and found out that she had no Indian whatsoever. And so basically, she lied to get a job, a DEI job. So it's just, but yeah, she has gotten rich by doing the bankers' bidding. So 40 of them are trying to block any crypto firm from having access to a Fed account. So let's go through some of these. So it looks like, Scott submitted some, Cortez submitted some, Kim. Let's see here. All right, here we go. Here's where Warren starts. So unfortunately, on a lot of these, it just has that she's wanting to strike certain sections, but others. So like, here's one. The amendment would prohibit digital asset custodians from rehypothecating customer assets. So you might have to help me out. I've heard the word, but I'll be honest, I don't know what it means. Rehypothecating. I'm guessing that means using customer assets to
more than once
to invest. Basically, what banks do whenever we deposit our money. They only want banks to be able to do that.
Right. That's pretty close to what it means, I would say. So when you receive a customer deposit, they want these deposits to not be able to be used for anything else, any other purpose. So,
Which I can agree with, but that should be the case for banks too.
and so it's not the case for banks,
No,
and effectively that allows them to create credit. If you receive $1,000 a customer deposit, that's a liability for you as the bank. You've got to lend that out. But if you only have to keep a small percentage of that $1,000 on your books,
fractional reserve banking is what it's
right,
called.
then that creates leverage. That creates structural leverage in the system because you can lend that dollar out, multiple times. So
Yeah,
I,
sometimes
I
like
think
nine times.
I,
They can.
up to 40,
It's basically banks printing money.
40, 40.
Oh, 40?
Many,
Oh, holy
many,
shit.
many, many of those banks, especially in 2007, were operating at like 40x leverage.
So, these are the banks that we, the taxpayer, are giving interest-free loans and bailing out while they're paying their executives bonuses for running the banks into the ground and
Right.
making them insolvent, basically. So this is what the politicians are doing. This is who they're fighting for. They're not fighting for me and you. They're fighting to make sure that the banks keep their power, and that they're able to basically launder money and do all the things that they've historically done, all the shady shit that they historically done. And and they don't want us to have a tool like DeFi to where we can make money on our liquidity. We can have savings accounts and retirement accounts that we can invest in DeFi and lend it out to other people with smart contracts, so that it's as safe as it can be, and earn yield. So you can have $100,000 in an account and you can lend that out. And we're still very early. You got to be careful with that. With what happened with Aave. Definitely, you need to do your research. But as this, as DeFi and crypto matures, I really think that the risk of it is going to decrease as well. And as more liquidity enters, those two things combined, I personally think that yields are going to become a lot more realistic, because the reason that they offer higher yields is because there's more risk. If you're dealing with a protocol that is new, they're trying to attract liquidity. They don't have a proven track record usually. So they you don't know what their architecture's like. Like Aave, where they pooled all the liquidity together. You don't know how they manage the the wallets that are holding all the liquidity for the platform. Is it multi-sig? Is it one person that has access to it, and if they're compromised, all the liquidity is at risk, which
So,
we've seen on some of these.
so Mike, let's talk about in the Clarity Act. Let's talk about the custody part, the wallets part,
Okay.
because it looks to me like there are four major, categories of amendments here, and the third one is, and this is laughable, anti-money laundering and self-custody. That's a category of amendments in the Clarity Act. And what it says here is that national security hawks, of course, whatever that means, are focused on how the bill handles private wallets, so self-custody. Now, in my opinion, the bill should have nothing to do with how private citizens handle their own assets. Okay, but this is what it says. There are amendments in there that require quote unquote unhosted wallets. So those are private wallets. It requires these unhosted wallets to follow similar reporting rules as traditional bank accounts. That's that, basically communist travel rule bullshit.
Yeah.
So here's the pushback. Privacy advocates are arguing that this is technically impossible for decentralized protocols to do, and it would effectively ban self-custody in the United States. But those are a set of amendments. that we see today
Mhm.
made to this Clarity Act. So I've been talking about that this Clarity Act would not be a positive piece of legislation for the crypto and DeFi industry in the United States. And in fact, it would be a net negative. And that's what it's starting to look like to me. So, and look, markets are telling you that too.
I,
When you
I found a couple. I found one that she put in that I actually agree with. This amendment would require the Fed, OCC, and FDIC to release the bank supervisory information regarding Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators. I agree with that.
the fuck does that have to do with crypto and DeFi?
It has nothing to do with it, but you know what? Fuck yeah, I agree with
What?
that.
What? Why is that even in there? Like, what
Dude,
does that have to do with anything?
let's be honest. Any piece of legislation that goes through our fucking government has riders, pork, earmarks, all that bullshit. And it's because they're basically like, I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in here there's funding for a bridge in somebody's district, that they represent to basically
Dude,
buy their vote.
I swear to God, if there's funding for like transgender animal surgeries in Nigeria in here somewhere, it's just like, it wouldn't surprise me either.
No. But another one that I found that I don't agree with is the amendment would keep risky assets out of retirement accounts, including pension plans.
Oh, what does
So
that mean?
basically, it would keep crypto and any anything to do with crypto out of retirement accounts and pension plans. Which, you know what, none of their fucking business.
Right. I mean, exactly. Exactly. It's none of their business at all. And I think that that's on the heels of, I was reading, there were a bunch of unions, and these union bosses are really horrible, man. Like these unions, generally speaking, are
They're
horrible.
criminal organizations.
They're absolutely criminal. And these unions came out a couple of days ago and were saying that you can't own digital assets in your retirement accounts because it's too risky. And so I think that's where it must have come from. And it's
It's
like,
like,
dude,
last time I checked, I'm a fucking adult,
who are these?
and a free man. I can do whatever the fuck I want.
And who are these Congress people beholden to? Like, do they work for us, or do they
No,
just work for these fucking union bosses? Like, who do they actually work for, man? Because like
they
when you read these amendments, it's like it's pretty clear that this came direct from industries that are opposed to sovereignty, opposed to you being sovereign with your finances by owning digital assets. They want to
they are
control you.
they are beholden to the people that shovel money at them so that they can get reelected, and the cartels or the unions that control large swaths of people, like the teachers union or labor unions,
And
things
they're
like
communist. They're
yeah,
fucking commies, dude.
yeah.
Ugh,
I mean,
gross.
back in the day, unions were necessary. I mean, shit was bad. I mean, people were working for slave wages and terrible conditions. I get it, but you know what? Since then, it's become basically. I mean, not basically, organized crime. I mean, the mob notoriously, ran the unions, and basically you did what it was that they said, or you didn't work because unions, if you don't vote how they tell you to vote, if you don't pay your dues, if you don't do what it is that they say, they control all the jobs. If you're in the dock workers union, longshoremen, I think is what they call
Mhm.
them. If you don't toe the line, you don't get work. It's
Yeah.
just they're terrible now. But
Yeah.
anyway, um,
Especially the schools, man, those education, like the teachers unions, straight up communist. Like the entire Democrat Party is basically a criminal organization. Not basically,
our
it
entire
is
government, both Republican and Democrat, there's very few exceptions.
both.
It's
But at least when you look at the left, it's like, okay, that entire party like is no longer recognizable from what it
oh,
was even 20
absolutely,
years ago.
absolutely.
It's literally become just like a money laundering organization.
Well, check this out. So Reed, he looks like he's trying to put something in. Prohibits crypto from being used as legal tender, for example, to pay taxes. So you're
Wait,
going
what?
to Well, my thing is okay. So we passed the Genius Act, where stable coins that are backed 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar or U.S. dollar equivalent, which is legal tender. So does that mean that this is going to conflict with the Genius Act? So if I want to pay my taxes with USDC, I can't. So are you saying that the dollar is worthless? Or I'm not authorized to use the dollar to pay my
I don't.
taxes?
I can't tell whether this retard understands what digital assets are or not.
Most
They're
of them don't.
bearer assets. It's like cash. They're like
Yeah.
cash, dude.
It's freaking ridiculous.
See what
Um,
else you can pull out from there.
establish a So Haggerty and McCormick establishes a digital asset innovation center to advance digital asset security and counter illicit finance while fostering U.S. innovation. So I get it, but to be honest, the government is not going to run something like that well.
Government can't run shit well, bro. The only thing that we do well is bomb people. We're good at that.
Honestly, something like that should be run by a civilian organization that is, maybe there's some oversight from government organizations, but for the most part is run by the industry that understands it. That's my personal opinion.
I agree. I don't think that. I think that honestly, government should be cut by 75%. Maybe at a minimum, just cut it in half.
Yeah.
That would be the minimum. And then that temporary World War One income tax to pay for the war. Don't worry, it's just temporary. That was from World War One. Is World War One over yet? Maybe since it is, we can get rid of that fucking bullshit income tax. That would be a great idea, don't you think?
Or fucking property tax. What kind of bullshit is that?
Yeah, you're basically leasing your property from the state. Who decided that that was a good idea? Like, if you have to pay the state every year a tax to keep your property, you don't own it. The state
No.
does. And so, there's basically most of this tax system should be just completely removed. And
through
cut.
inflation, they force the elderly off, out of their fucking homes. So basically, they paid into Social Security their whole life that doesn't give them shit. I mean, most people pay about $2 million or more into Social Security over their lifetime,
And you don't get shit back.
And they get like $1,200 or $1,300 a month. You could have invested in the stock market yourself.
It's literally a scam.
It's
literally a fucking scam. Like
it is. And then they inflate the dollar to where it's worth less and less, and property values keep going up and up. So they keep raising property taxes, and it just gets to a point to where people have to choose between eating food or losing their house.
You know what? People need to start being able to do this. They need to be able to say, "I don't give a fuck," and they need to actually mean it. There's a difference between just saying it and actually meaning it. Like when you look around and you see just how fucked most things are, while at the same time we have the highest standard of living that we've ever enjoyed, like in history, right? Like things are really, really good. Like you've got 30 different flavors of bagels at the supermarket,
Yeah.
like all the stuff that really doesn't matter. You've got a bazillion different choices. But when it comes to the stuff that really does matter, you're told exactly what to do, exactly what to think. And also, this is where we need to, receive your check every year. Otherwise, you're going to prison. So to me, that's extortion, man. And you need to be able to say, I don't give a fuck. I'm not participating in this shit.
I'll be honest. The fucks I give are becoming a lot less. It's just being retired, and not having a mortgage, having my property paid off, and just each year watching my property taxes go up and up and up and up. If I wasn't investing, and if I didn't have my property paid off, potentially, in the future, at this rate, I would be in that ballpark to where I, could potentially lose my house that I built myself, like literally with my own two hands. I lived in a tent and built my house myself, and the government can just walk on my property and say, "Get off! It's not yours anymore." Which I'll just say openly and honestly, will not happen. If I'm taking off this property, it's going to be in a body bag.
Yeah, just tell them to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like I don't want violence, but I'm not giving up my house because of a corrupt government.
So, what about one thing that I'm interested in with this Clarity Act, Mike, is there's an amendment, I think the Scott Loomis, a manager's amendment. It has to do with DeFi and law enforcement. And the issue here is that they want to be.
What was his name?
Scott and Loomis. So those two together, Tim Scott and Cynthia Loomis. So it looks like they're trying to ensure that decentralized systems aren't regulated out of existence while still giving law enforcement tools to fight illicit finance. There's no way to achieve both of those goals at the same time. It's impossible. So here's the amendment. As the chairman and subcommittee chair, so Scott and Loomis, they released a massive substitute amendment that serves as the baseline for the current markup. So the specific additions include some DAO and developer protections. Let's see what this actually means, though. Is some language clarifying that decentralized governance systems like DAOs cannot be treated as a single person or entity under common control. Furthermore, it protects software developers by stating that writing or publishing code does not make someone a money transmitter. Okay, but that's still, that language, just what I'm reading is quite vague. So the temporary hold safe harbor, there is a provision allowing digital asset service providers to voluntarily place a short temporary, a temporary hold on suspicious transactions, especially when requested in writing by law enforcement without facing private, federal, or state lawsuits from users. Oh my God, provided the platform acts in good faith. Dude, that is straight up bullshit. So let me reread that real quick. This is the temporary hold safe harbor. This would allow a law enforcement to freeze your assets on a so-called decentralized protocol as long as the platform is acting in good faith and you can't sue the platform. So it says it's a provision allowing digital asset service providers, so think a DeFi protocol like Uniswap, which is US based. It would allow them to voluntarily place a short, quote unquote, temporary hold on suspicious transactions. What the fuck is a suspicious transaction? What exactly does that mean, man? And it says, especially when requested.
It means whatever they want it to mean. Is
right,
what it means.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's the whole problem. So especially when requested in writing by law enforcement. And these DeFi protocols would not face private, federal, or state lawsuits from users. So it like insulates DeFi protocols from being sued when they freeze their users' transactions temporarily because it's suspicious. Dude, like this is exactly what I was warning about. Like this is going to drive innovation out of the United States permanently. It's not going to come back. It's over. And like if this gets signed into law, then people are going to leave. Anyone who's serious about building something cool is going to get out of Dodge while they still can. Because if you know that you can't legally build something awesome in the United States, number one, without raising several million dollars for compliance, and number two, you're going to have all of these different agencies breathing down your neck constantly. People are not going to fucking put up with that. They're going to leave.
You're going to need to have an army of lawyers on retainer.
Dude, it's just like, that's bullshit. So they're literally forcing the best and brightest in this burgeoning space to Southeast Asia. That's what they're doing with this legislation, which makes no sense whatsoever unless this legislation was written by banks and corrupt politicians who are beholden to banks.
The thing
That
that
makes
they
sense
don't
to me.
get is they can slow this down. They're not stopping it because it's going to go somewhere and it's going to grow and it's going to get adopted. And the way that the internet works, with VPNs and everything else, people are going to find a way. Yeah, I mean, it's just the way it is. People are going to find a way to use this stuff because everyone's waking up. They're seeing the corruption. They see that the governments don't work for us, and they're looking to remove themselves. Why do you think there's like this massive, freaking movement of people wanting to move out of cities and move into the country and grow their own food and start, mini farms and all that stuff? Is they're, because they're getting away from mainstream media and starting to actually research things themselves. They're starting to find out that all the people that had tinfoil hats were right. There
Yeah,
was
about
aliens.
everything.
Our food is poison. They are
Yeah,
putting shit in our food to purposely
and
make us
water,
ill, so
and
that we
water.
have to buy their freaking ridiculously priced freaking prescription medications that are made out of petroleum products, byproducts, and it's like the biggest scam in fucking history.
And the vaccines are fake and fucking deadly. Like they
Yeah,
don't, number one, they don't fucking work, most of them. And
yeah,
number two, all of the safety studies that have been performed on them are fucking bullshit.
yeah.
It's just like, wow, man. All of the foundational stories that I learned as a child about
Mm-hmm.
America
Or a lie.
um, turned out to be a lie,
Yeah.
and it's just like, but I love the founding documents, and
Oh, dude, I
I
love
love the
my country, and I
I
love
love
what we were founded on. I'd hate the corruption that has twisted it, between then and now, and what it's become. I mean,
me
it's
too,
literally a cancer.
me too.
The U.S. government is literally a cancer.
Well, I think that there's one side of the aisle that's worse than the other,
It
but I
it
see
doesn't
both
matter
of them,
when
that
it's
uni party
disease.
shit. Yeah, I see both of them with that uni party shit where it's like, dude, if you can't even pass the SAVE Act, like it, like the whole
If you
idea,
can't even agree to release, investigate, and prosecute freaking child predators, if you can't even agree on that shit, you just need to fucking go away.
like, dude, if there's no ID to be able to vote, and if you can mail in a ballot, like voting needs to be in person with ID only.
Yeah.
Okay. Like the whole idea that black people don't have IDs, that's fucking number one, racist as fuck. And number
Yeah.
two, retarded. Like you need an ID to do anything.
If you
Of
want to buy
course.
alcohol, cigarettes, drive a vehicle,
Like
if
give
you
me a
want to
break,
get
man.
get into a rated R movie, you need an ID.
Like, come on, man. Everyone's got an ID. And like the whole idea that you're gonna mail in a ballot, like now that we know, and you can go, watch plenty of video footage of this, but now that we know that there was definitely massive voter fraud, and there has been for decades in every
Oh,
election, it's
yeah.
just like, well, if we can't agree that you need to have an ID when you show up to vote in person and there's no more mail in ballots, then you're not going to have free or fair elections.
No.
So if you're not going to have free or fair elections,
We
then that means people are going to game it.
we only got about 10 minutes before the deep dives. Actually, what do you got for us today?
I've got some interesting stuff. So, we've been going through,
Real quick, because we only got 10 minutes and I got a bunch of news to get to. We got on rabbit trails.
yeah. So we're going to take a look today at Avalanche. I'm sure
Mhm.
Colin will love that one. We're going to take a look at Stellar XLM. I don't know much of anything about XLM except
do.
that it's like, okay, great, that'll be fun. And then we're going to take a look at SUI, SUI.
Okay.
So the plan over the next couple of months here is I want to get through all the rest of the top 100, and then I want to move into the top 200. So from 100 to 200, because the top
Oh,
200.
the top 100 in that time period is probably going to evolve quite a bit.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But like once you get outside of the top 100, then you start getting into like the smaller market cap stuff.
Mhm.
That's the stuff where you find some really interesting coins in there. That's the shit that can do the 100x.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's what I'm looking forward to.
So it looks like Ethereum Foundation launches clear signing standards to end blind signing exploits. The Ethereum Foundation rolled out an open standard built on ERC 7730 to replace blind signing with human readable transaction approvals backed by all the major wallets. So this, I think, is fucking crazy important because being able to understand what you're signing, what permissions are you giving? What is it that's, if I hit this button, what exactly is going to happen? That is massively valuable because that, for the most part, in most cases, that's not what you get. It's just, are you, do you want to give access to your USDC? Yes or no? And
So
I want to
here's
know, if I give access, where is it going? How much of it is going? And I want some details. And so I guess that's what this is doing.
so let me ask you a question, Mike. If you were about to sign a written contract, would you read it?
Oh, of course.
Right. What's the difference between, doing that and signing an approval using your hardware wallet or hot wallet? It's the same thing. You're doing the
Yeah.
same thing. What if you don't read what you're about to sign and there's something malicious in what you sign? What would happen in the regular
It's
world?
well, in the if imagine you're signing like a paper document, and as soon as you're done, stroking the pen, somewhere in there it says that they can throw you in jail and take everything you own.
Yeah,
And as soon as you're done signing, a bunch of people grab you and whisk you away. That's
right.
basically what happens with a crypto wallet. As soon as you hit
So
that button and it goes through, whatever is in that smart contract gets executed. So if it's to drain your entire wallet, it drains your entire wallet, and there's nothing you can do to stop it once you hit
right,
approve.
right. You got to be careful what you sign. And if you don't know what you're signing, then you don't sign it. And
Yeah,
so that's why, whenever I'm working with Ellie on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she's sharing her screen as she's going through and, signing transactions,
and
like,
revoking permissions after, and
and then immediately after we're done operating, she goes in and revokes. These are basic security best practices. Like,
yes,
you have to know to do this stuff when you're operating in crypto and DeFi. If you don't, well, then, show up to some of the live calls and,
Mhm.
or maybe schedule some time to learn about private coaching if you really want to build the skill set more quickly. So,
Or just go through DeFi University.
or go through the no cost educational content.
Yeah. All right, next one we got Bitwise and Jupiter launched institutional lending. So Jupiter, an on-chain finance platform, partnered with Bitwise Asset Management and Fluid to launch an Athena-focused lending market on Solana. The market
Huh.
is designed to scale into billions of dollars in institutional capital.
Huh. Okay. So they're using Athena's USDE. Wow, that's interesting. So it looks like it's curated by Bitwise. Yeah, I see that. And
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to turn this into a bridge between TradFi and DeFi. So
Mm-hmm.
how would the mechanics work here? It says the market focuses on USDE, allowing users to deposit the asset to earn yield or use it as collateral for leverage strategies. That's interesting. So
So
let
it
yeah.
says here, until now, institutional capital and on-chain lending have mostly operated in parallel. This launch puts them in the same structure where Jupiter Lend provides the market, Bitwise curates the market, Athena supplies the asset, and Fluid runs the infrastructure. Each piece has been independently proven,
I like
and this
fluid.
what's that?
Fluid. I like fluid a lot.
Yeah,
Fluid's pretty awesome.
yeah. And this is the first time they have been assembled together in an institutional scale in a live on chain market. Interesting.
Yeah, that really is. So I wonder how this legislation treats USDE. The new Clarity Act and
Yeah.
Genius legislation,
Yeah.
because it's USDE is one of these quote unquote algorithmic stable coins, and it's
Hmm.
the biggest of them. And so, what that means is USDE is a token minted by Athena, a protocol. which is essentially a big crypto hedge fund. And they're running a basis trade where when you deposit USDC on Athena, what they're doing with that USDC is they're buying Ethereum. I think probably the staked, Lido wrapped staked ETH, something like that, that's yield bearing. And then they immediately sell futures against it to become delta neutral. And they're hedging the funding rate on those short futures. So they're able to generate yield by, earning the staking yield on the ETH and whatever the funding rate is on the futures. So that yield.
But it because of all that, it's not compliant by U.S. standards.
I'm not sure whether it is or not. It seems like it probably wouldn't be, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, it sounds like from what you just said that it's not backed by the U.S. dollar or U.S. dollar equivalent. If it's an algorithmic stablecoin.
Yeah, let's see what with the Genius Act and the Clarity Act. I wonder if USDE is compliant, because it's not backed by treasuries or cash. So it says here, the compliance of USDE with the Genius Act and Clarity Act, it says it's one of the most complex legal questions in the crypto industry today. Well, no shit, I don't think it's compliant. I don't see how it could be.
I don't either.
It says here that the Genius Act defines payment stablecoins. And so under this law, USDE faces two major compliance hurdles. Number one, the yield prohibition, which is straight up bullshit.
Yeah,
like that yield prohibition is written by banks. Yep. And dude, if Congress people are just allowing banksters to write legislation, then we don't have we don't have representation in Congress if our laws are being written by industry.
Basically, banks might as well have,
they might as well just, put their logos on the Congress people's suits, kind of like in NASCAR, where you've got the, you can see who sponsors, the cars. That's what they need to do.
We might as well, we the people should stop paying them because they're not working for us, and we should, stop fucking, going through
stop the charade,
the kabuki dance of freaking voting, because
it's just fake. So, since USD is primary,
it's the illusion that, that we, the people, are still running things, that we're free people.
It's like back in the Roman days, they would throw, those big with the gladiators, they would have
the Colosseum, they had the games and they throw the bread and, stuff like that. It was to pacify the masses.
And nowadays it's, you go to buy your poison food and you've got 500 different flavors of, cheesecake or whatever the fuck. And but the things that actually matter, you don't get any say in, you don't get any choice in.
Oh, so, no, they distract you with, movies and sports and, social media and, all these different things. And, it's a gilded cage is basically what it is.
So here's something interesting, though, about that yield prohibition. So since USDE's primary feature is it's basically like internet bond yield, it fails that definition. It's not compliant with the Genius Act's yield prohibition. And also there are reserve requirements. So the Genius Act requires stablecoins to be backed one for one by quote unquote high quality liquid assets like cash and US treasuries. So I would not consider treasuries to be high quality assets if USM2 is inflating quickly and inflation is ticking back up. You don't want to be holding cash. So, but that's what the Genius Act says. And so since USDE is backed by basically Ethereum and short positions, it fails that definition for the reserve requirements from the Genius Act. And so here's another thing. Basically, the result here is that USDE is not compliant as a quote unquote payment stablecoin. Instead, it's classified as a quote digital asset or quote synthetic commodity, which keeps it outside the banking style regulations of the Genius Act, but it places it under the jurisdiction of the Clarity Act. So does that mean, is USDE a non-registered security, an unregistered security? Like what exactly is this thing? So it's saying that under the Clarity Act, USDE is largely viewed as an investment contract asset
So
or
a security.
or a digital commodity, depending on the degree of the decentralization of the Athena protocol. Dude, Athena is basically like a VC protocol. It's not decentralized. And so here's the yield.
That would mean that it's a security.
I mean, dude, look, in DeFi
by,
and crypto,
by the Clarity Act's definition.
I know it's like in DeFi and crypto, code is law. And so, like, you've got these two parallel systems. You've got these corrupt piece of shit politicians who write bullshit laws, and then you've got code is law in crypto and DeFi. And the corrupt pieces of shit are trying to impose their will on builders in DeFi. So you've got this yield compromise, though. The Tillis also Brooks amendment that's currently being debated, it's going to be crucial, it says, for USDE. So what that amendment does is it seeks to ban rewards solely for holding a stablecoin. So what does that mean for Athena's USDE? Now, Athena's defense is that USDE is a derivative product, not a payment stablecoin, and therefore the yield is a byproduct of a delta neutral strategy, not a banking interest payment. So just the whole idea that these regulators are going to tell builders in DeFi what they can and can't do based on what they're beholden to, bankers, that's some bullshit. And so here's a little bit of institutional participation. We got on this topic talking about Bitwise and Jupiter. So today they made a massive bet that USDE will be deemed compliant under the Clarity Act's framework for institutional lending, provided that risk disclosures and margin requirements meet the Act's new standards. So yeah, but what if someone wants to launch their new product that is similar to USDE but better? They wouldn't be able to do anything like that because they'd need to have an army of attorneys to be able to get it through some type of compliance process before you could even launch it. So, oh man, it's just extremely frustrating to know what type of innovation we could be spurring now in the United States and how it's being quashed by this nonsense regulation. So I think that, and markets are telling us that here too today. I think that a lot of these amendments, I see Bitcoin rejected at the 200-day moving average and breaking support, breaking down. Only off 1.6% on the session, but I think altcoins are the true barometer here. So if we see altcoins start to actually really accelerate to the downside, I think that would be telling us that the market does not like this legislation. We'll see. We'll see what ends up getting passed, or if they even end up voting on it. I certainly, at this point, I really don't even care. I think the Clarity Act is bullshit. I think the Genius Act is written by banks. And I think that this entire industry, crypto and DeFi, would be better off without it. Yeah. So when people say like, oh, institutional capital this, institutional, regulation that, it's like Bitcoin doesn't need any of that stuff.
Well, I think we've seen, with ETFs, for the most part, they've driven the price down on these assets because I really think I made a couple of comments this morning on some posts that people did because they were bullish on some new ETFs coming out, and I'm like, pretty much every ETF has I think Bitcoin is really the only exception, has sent the price down because these institutions, they know how valuations work. They know how profitability, actual profitability, and a well-run company, how to do evaluation. Whereas retail, everything was driven by pure speculation. I mean, hell, you can look at the market cap, like we did yesterday, of some of these top 10, top 20 projects that have no product, they have no service, and somehow have tens of billions of dollars of TVL. There's no way they are worth that much when they don't generate revenue, when they don't generate a profit. And I think there's going to be a huge correction on a lot of these projects. And I think it's going to come soon. As soon as this legislation is done, and I think that the institutional money is what's going to make that happen, because it's going to flood into good, solid, companies that are offering good, solid, products, in the form of stocks, and not into the tokens of some of these, because, like we always say here, if you don't understand the tokenomics and how the token is connected, how there's a correlation between the success of the company and its profitability, and somehow in the tokenomics that is shared with token holders. If you don't understand that relationship, you should not be investing in these assets.
Now, Mike, the one of the tokens that we looked at yesterday, LEO, the Leo token, which is somehow the 10th largest digital asset. That one is actually, it looks like legit synthetic equity, but as we learned, it's got a big problem. And that big problem is those 95,000 Bitcoin that are being held by the DOJ, which I think will never be returned. Never. Negatory. Negative ghostwriter. Not happening.
Bitfinex or whatever that was.
Yeah, not happening. They're not getting that 95K Bitcoin back. Not going to happen in a million years.
All right, so our last story before we do our deep dives. So Ethereum closes the gap with Solana as DEX volumes converge near 45 billion. So the current near parity gives both chains another chance to position themselves to capture volume when on-chain activity rotates back. The following, let's do this. The gap between Solana and Ethereum DEX volume has narrowed considerably. A lot of that has to do with what anybody paying attention understood about Solana. The majority of the DEX volume was meme coins. As that interest waned, or dropped, then it lost much of its DEX volume. I mean, that's just the facts. Much of Solana's volumes and TVL has been in meme coins. So it looks like Solana's ratio relative to Ethereum falling to approximately 94%. This sets a 12-month low, is a sharp reversal from the 218% peak recorded in January of 2026. Both chains are now processing roughly 45 billion in monthly DEX volume. Ethereum's relative resilience through that period reflects a structurally different volume composition with deeper liquidity pools, stablecoin pairs, and DeFi activity that tend to hold up better when speculative appetite contracts. This is something that we've talked about. As these chains mature, as more TVL and more institutions build on these protocols and on these chains, it's going to flatten out a lot of the volatility, and the majority of the building, it goes on Ethereum. And so it is less susceptible to the market volatility. Yes, we have not seen massive pumps in Ethereum. It has, underperformed against Bitcoin. But we haven't seen massive volatility in Ethereum like we have in the past. We also haven't seen massive volatility in the volumes. So these are key things to understand. So what do you have to say on this topic before we get into the deep dives, David?
Yeah, so it's, for me, it's the casino versus the treasury. I think that's the core difference here. So on Solana, you've got the Solana casino, and then you've got the Ethereum treasury. So there are two distinct roles, I think. Solana is, it's got a ton of transactions every single day. It's really a go-to for a lot of retail, for a lot of AI agents, and for a lot of high frequency trading, because it's cheap and really, really fast. Ethereum, if you're operating on the main net, that could be considered like the settlement layer, more like a treasury. It's got similar DEX volume to Solana, but it holds 10 times more stablecoin liquidity. And so while Solana, you've got more trades happening on Solana, Ethereum handles much larger trades. So you've got, these whales swapping millions of dollars at a time on Ethereum, whereas you've got millions of very, very small transactions happening every day on Solana. So you've got the Solana casino versus the Ethereum treasury. And if you just take a look at the dApps that have been built on Ethereum and its layer 2s, there are some really interesting primitives that have been built. On Solana, it's, not quite as interesting, I would say. The dApp ecosystem is much, much smaller on Solana than it is on Ethereum. But I have no problem operating on Solana. I bought one of those Seeker phones a couple of months ago, and yeah. So let's see here. I want to just take a look at some TA just real quick. I want to share this with everyone. So this pattern, this is a very bearish pattern. This is Bitcoin. This is a 1 hour chart. And so the important thing here is, I was warning about this, that if Bitcoin falls out of this ascending wedge, that we could send to 50K or maybe a little bit below 50K. And so take a look at this pattern. This is a very bearish pattern. So we've actually got two bearish patterns in one here. So this is the pole and this is the flag. And here's that 200-day moving average acting as resistance. Here's that ascending wedge. So you got a bear flag and an ascending wedge, both very bearish price action patterns. Now, if we just zoom in a little bit so we can see this a little bit more clearly here, not only do we have the bearish price action pattern, but we're actually falling out of that ascending wedge right now today. So
and got rejected off that 200.
Yeah, see, that's what I was saying to watch out for, is that 200-day moving average really did act as resistance. We got the ascending wedge, 200-day moving average falling out of the ascending wedge. I think the next move for Bitcoin is this. I can just go ahead and prognosticate for a second here, because look, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about direction. All I have is the ability to recognize patterns over the course of years and years of looking at charts. And so this pattern, these two patterns, this level of resistance, the fact that we're in a midterm year, it's a Bitcoin bear market year, we're still in like the 5th or 6th inning of the bear market. All of those things together tell me that, hey, something like this is up next for BTC. That's what this tells me. And the target is down here. That's the target. So that's what I'm thinking. Now that we've broken down out of this falling wedge pattern or rising wedge pattern, a falling wedge is very bullish, a rising wedge is very bearish. So this is kind of what I expect, over the summer for Bitcoin, is that it takes a nice little dumpy dump, it just moves down to like 47, something like that. That's what I expect out of BTC. And so think, if this happens and it's just, a normal Bitcoin bear market, it gets down to 50, let's say, maybe a little bit below there, and then that's the trough. What does that do to altcoins? What would that do to alts like Ethereum? Ethereum would get trounced. Altmageddon, exactly. You'd see ETH down here at $1,000. Solana, what would happen to Solana?
Probably in the 30s.
Yeah, probably lower than that, I think, even.
Oh, okay.
And then let's take a look maybe down the horn here. We take a look at like Tron. This one's actually up on the session. So Tron has actually been isolated from this price action. So what you need to be able to recognize is those assets that are bucking the trend. So if Tron is no longer going to be really positively correlated with Bitcoin, then if you're looking for a place to stash some cash during a Bitcoin bear, and you don't want to just throw it on a money market and earn 4%, well, then take a look at TRX. This one looks pretty good. But you take a look down the list here, here's Tau, one of the higher quality AI protocols, getting so far rejected. This is just a series of lower highs. So, BitTensor Tau, this will definitely be one of the assets that I buy sometime later on this year. You take a look at something like SUI. Remember just a couple of days ago, a lot of people were talking about, oh man, is this the start of a new bull? No, it's not. Rejected at the 200-day moving average and giving back those gains. So this was just a dead cat bounce. Same thing with a bunch of these other tokens. You take a look at Ton, really big dead cat bounce, but just like Tau, putting in simply a lower high and giving back those gains. You take a look, we're going to learn about AVAX in a couple of seconds here. Avalanche didn't even make it up to its 200-day moving average and giving back what little gains it had. And the thing about AVAX, this is one of the weakest of the large cap layer one alts because it's already trading at its 2022 bear market lows. It's right back down to its bear market lows. So that tells me that if Bitcoin sends to 50K, then this thing is gonna dump. Like AVAX, I think you could definitely see AVAX with a 2 handle at some point later on this year, like $2 and change for AVAX. And then the last one here before we hop into the research is I want to take a look at that dogshit coin XLM. So here's XLM, and oh yeah, DE
did.
That's my analysis for this. That's all we need. So I had a big X mark through this. I forgot about that. Let me just go ahead and remove this real quick so we can take a look at this thing. So here's this 200-week moving average just moving sideways, and it's trading below that 200-week moving average. So, it wouldn't surprise me to see XLM send back down to 7 cents. And if that doesn't hold, then 3 cents on the downside.
Dude, I got to read this. This is fucking disgusting. Brad Garlinghouse just freaking
fuck that
45
guy.
minutes ago. The Senate Banking Committee is putting in the work as it moves the Clarity Act forward. Incredible leadership. Millions of Americans are already in this market. Ripple stands behind this bill because they deserve the same rules and protections as every other asset class. If the largest economy in the world is going to lead on crypto, and it must, this is the moment. Let's get it done. It's such fucking propaganda bullshit.
Fuck that guy.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's what I have to say.
Yeah.
You can go fucking suck a bag of dicks, dude, for real.
Yeah.
Okay, so which one do you want to start with? Avalanche or Stellar? Or I kind of want to start with Avalanche because this, there's a handful of alts that look like, well, to me anyway, every alt, just about every alt looks like a great short opportunity, but Avalanche specifically looks like a really, really good short opportunity because it's already at its 2022 bear market lows. So if Bitcoin sends to 50K, I think Avalanche is, got another 70% left on the downside. So that is a pretty interesting short opportunity because if you just use zero leverage and it sends to $2.50 Avalanche, then you make like 65, 70% with no leverage. Now imagine you apply like 5x leverage to that. Well, all of a sudden you can do like, 400% or so. So that is pretty cool. Now let's take a look at this. Mike, let me know if you can't hear it.
All right.
In early 2026, the digital asset market split.
Can you hear it? Mike, can you hear it when I was playing it or no? Because thumbs up. Okay.
Are you not able to see my thumb? I always do thumbs up.
Well, yeah, because when I'm looking at the video, I can't see you when I'm watching the video.
Yeah, no, I'll let you know. Like you asked, if I can't hear it, I'll let you know.
Gotcha.
Speculative retail liquidity rotated aggressively into highly volatile meme coin ecosystems. But beneath that highly volatile surface, a massive wave of institutional capital is quietly establishing deep, permanent roots. This split-screen visualization captures the current market paradox for the Avalanche network. On the left side, the AVAX token price flatlines between $9 and $10.50, a steep discount from historical valuations. On the right side, utility metrics are surging. Avalanche recently surpassed 10 billion all-time transactions, and its tokenized real-world asset sector expanded by 950% year-over-year. Looking closer at these metrics, we see a maturing token economy. Over 60% of the maximum supply is already in circulation. The fully diluted valuation sits at roughly $4.2 billion, closely matching the current market cap. The heavy venture capital dilution overhang that plagues newer competitor networks has cleared. Avalanche stepped away from the general-purpose Layer 1 wars. Ava Labs repositioned the protocol to execute a single, targeted strategy, providing the dominant infrastructure for customized, sovereign enterprise networks. Competitors like Solana and Monad prioritize raw throughput. They optimize for unified liquidity and parallel processing on a single state machine to push over 10,000 real-world transactions per second. This visualization shows the risk of that monolithic design, the noisy neighbor problem. When all applications are forced to share a single state machine, a sudden spike in retail trading volume floods the pipeline. That creates unpredictable latency spikes, which makes it impossible for commercial banks to execute multi-million-dollar bond settlements with certainty. Ethereum Layer 2 rollups attempt to bypass this by moving execution off-chain. They offer sub-millisecond execution speeds locally. However, true economic finality still takes roughly 13 minutes because the rollup must eventually settle its data back onto the Ethereum mainnet. Avalanche avoids the monolithic bottleneck through an architecture of customized sovereignty. Applications deploy their own dedicated Layer 1 networks. Their block space is isolated and completely shielded from the transaction traffic of the broader ecosystem. For Wall Street architects, raw speed on a shared public ledger is useless if a transaction can be delayed by network congestion. Guaranteed deterministic finality in under 2 seconds on an isolated network satisfies strict enterprise latency requirements.
Okay, so think about this for a second, Mike. You remember on October 10th when everything crashed? And Ethereum, I think at one point was down greater than $1,000 over the course of an hour, and then it was right back up and then back down again. And that transaction volume made it very, very difficult to get transactions through.
Yeah.
So if during periods of extreme volatility these chains break and just stop working, well, that tells me that many of these products, these Layer 1 chains, might not be ready for prime time. How in the world are you going to be able to settle, equity transactions, like from stocks, tokenized stocks on any of these chains if the moment there's real volatility, they freeze up and stop working? The answer is you can't. So kind of interesting the way that Avalanche has been able to solve for that problem. And maybe at some point over the next couple of weeks, we can have Colin on and he can describe exactly how the state machine works because he's one of the guys that built it.
Yeah.
Historically, deploying a custom Avalanche environment, previously called a subnet, came with extreme friction. Validators were forced to lock up a 2,000 AVAX bond. That heavy capital expenditure restricted rapid prototyping and limited deployments exclusively to heavily funded entities. In 2026, the Etna network upgrade activated proposal ACP-77. This decoupled L1 security from the primary network's massive bonding requirements. The rigid capital lockup was replaced by a pay-as-you-go registration fee of roughly 1.33 AVAX per month. By converting a heavy upfront capital expenditure into a negligible operational cost, Avalanche reduced the barrier to launching a sovereign blockchain by 99.9%. This economic adjustment acted as a direct catalyst. Independent game studios, agile Web3 startups, and enterprise innovation labs rapidly deployed their own environments, resulting in over 80 interconnected Layer 1s operating actively by mid-2026. ACP-77 transformed Avalanche from a static experimental sandbox into a highly scalable, revenue-generating software-as-a-service infrastructure layer, segmenting an ecosystem into 80...
Okay, so that makes sense to me now. Because, Mike, how many times have you read about some partnership between Avalanche and some large tech company, or Avalanche and a gaming studio, or something along those lines?
Well, gaming, they had Off the Grid was a really popular game there for a while. A really good first-person shooter or third-person shooter. And then there was the news where the California DMV was putting car titles on Avalanche. They've had some news, but it's been a minute since I've heard anything new.
Yeah, but it makes sense now because if you can essentially launch your own chain on Avalanche and do it on the cheap, well, that's pretty cool. But then here's the question: how does that accrue value to the AVAX token? So if that's always the question.
That's the question that one of the key points that we always focus on here, because if we're buying these tokens, it doesn't, if the tokenomics don't support it, it doesn't matter how successful the project is, how profitable they are. If that value doesn't make its way to token holders, then buying the token is pointless, other than trading the volatility or the speculation. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So how does value accrue to the AVAX token as a result of, businesses or individuals being able to launch their own chains on AVAX?
I honestly don't think it does.
I don't think so either. And I think the market is telling us that because it's sitting at its 2022 bear market lows. It's like one of the worst performing altcoins.
Yeah.
Different application chains creates a structural challenge: fragmented liquidity. This diagram illustrates Avalanche warp messaging, standardized by Proposal ACP 118. Instead of relying on a centralized intermediary, sovereign Layer 1 validators exchange cryptographic signatures to route assets and data directly and instantly between their isolated networks. By eliminating third-party bridges, Avalanche secures cross-chain communication at the native consensus layer. Users interact with a network of isolated chains, but experience the fluid liquidity of a single unified network. Still, Avalanche's main C-chain relies on the sequential processing of the legacy Ethereum virtual machine. That places a ceiling on its performance compared to parallel execution networks like Sui or Aptos. To neutralize that threat, developers use the Hyper SDK toolkit. It allows engineers to completely bypass the EVM. They can write highly optimized, parallelized custom virtual machines tailored exactly to their application's logic. A sovereign L1 can process non-conflicting transactions simultaneously, matching the speed of any move language chain, while routing liquidity through a shared, bridgeless base layer. Commercial banks cannot deploy applications on permissionless networks where anonymous nodes validate transactions. Avalanche's evergreen subnets solve this by enabling permissioned validator sets, allowing institutions to embed strict Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering controls directly into the consensus layer. The Spruce Evergreen testnet became the primary staging ground for Wall Street. Asset managers like T. Rowe Price and Wellington Management simulate cross-border trade execution using non-transferable identity tokens, testing full blockchain functionality within strict compliance boundaries. In early 2026, Japan's largest security token platform, Progmat, which commands 63% of the national market, initiated a massive mainnet migration. They are moving over $2 billion in tokenized real estate and corporate bonds onto a dedicated Avalanche Layer 1. Progmat abandoned the legacy Corda network. That siloed private consortium model lacked the interoperability and sub-second finality necessary for modern secondary market trading. Financial institutions require the operational efficiency and rapid settlement of a public blockchain, but demand the privacy and strict access control of a private database.
Yeah, well, I think Canton solves for that pretty well. And I think that's probably why Canton has been adopted so quickly and in such great volume by the likes of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. So, yeah, taking a look at Avalanche, they seem to have an uphill battle in order to be able to compete with Canton.
Avalanche's specific architecture delivers both simultaneously. This flowchart demonstrates Avalanche's dual-engine economic model. Layer 1 validators continuously pay registration fees, creating a predictable yield stream. Alongside that yield operates a deflationary counterbalance. During high network congestion, base transaction fees are permanently destroyed. 5 million AVAX have been removed from circulation. As hundreds of new sovereign chains deploy to support decentralized gaming and institutional credit protocols, they generate continuous validation fees and trigger deflationary burns. Enterprise adoption directly absorbs circulating token supply. global regulatory frameworks converged in 2026. Legislations like the European Union's MiCA directive mandate full reserve backing and strict prudential rules. Compliance is the absolute prerequisite for network survival. Anticipating this, Ava Labs expanded the Avalanche Policy Coalition. They proactively lobby global regulators to apply a functional test, advocating that technical infrastructure providers and validators should not be regulated under the same laws applied to financial intermediaries. While competing networks exhaust capital fighting zero-sum battles over retail transaction speed, Avalanche methodically built the specific, compliant infrastructure required by traditional finance. It now operates as a legally compliant interface for moving traditional financial assets onto interoperable digital rails.
Yeah, but it's got a lot of competitors out there, a lot of competitors, and its competitors seem to be outperforming it. Okay, so that was a little bit about Avalanche. Now I want to switch gears here and take a look at Stellar. So Stellar is, I think, well, what number is Stellar in terms of market cap here? Stellar, if I just go back on over to Coin Market Cap just real quick, I just want to see what is Stellar. It's got to be in the top 30, I think. So let's see here. It's number 18 if you exclude stables. Number 20 if you include stables. So it's number 20. This is a large cap coin, $5.3 billion market cap. And we're going to find out a little bit more about Stellar. Here we go.
Traditional banking institutions operate on two non-negotiable principles: strict verification of customer identities, known as KYC and AML controls, and absolute data secrecy. This creates immediate friction when these institutions look at public blockchains. By design, ledgers like Ethereum or Solana are transparent and permissionless, meaning anyone can view the history of every transaction. This is the TradFi paradox. Global banks cannot deploy proprietary strategies on networks where competitors monitor their capital flows and client data.
Right.
Despite these hurdles, the financial incentive to solve this friction is growing. By the first quarter of 2026, the market for tokenized real-world assets on the Stellar network alone surpassed $2 billion. Moving this scale of capital required a structural rebuild of standard blockchain architecture so that compliance is handled directly at the protocol level. Most competing networks try to solve this after the fact. They build isolated application-specific subnets or bolt complex regulatory logic on top of existing smart contracts. Stellar took a different approach in 2026, embedding zero-knowledge cryptography and governance controls directly into the native protocol, rather than relying on the smart contract layer. Asset managers like Franklin Templeton, Spyco, and Amundi have responded by moving hundreds of millions in sovereign yield onto the network. This adoption extends to sovereign infrastructure, with the government of Bermuda executing a plan to run its national economy on-chain. By integrating compliance into the protocol foundation, Stellar preserved a single global liquidity pool while meeting the specific requirements of regulated finance. Regulated entities have a strict mandate. They must prove to auditors that every transaction is mathematically valid. But they must do this without exposing underlying financial data or trading logic to the public ledger. Zero-knowledge, or ZK, cryptography provides a way to prove a statement is true without revealing the exact data that makes it true. However, ZK arithmetic is computationally intense. Running these calculations inside a standard smart contract layer creates a bottleneck that drives execution costs to prohibitive levels. To resolve this, Stellar deployed Protocol 25, known as X-Ray. X-Ray moved ZK arithmetic out of the smart contract environment and integrated it directly into the native host layer, reducing execution costs by 70%. This achieves parity with Ethereum's privacy precompiles, but does so at a fraction of a cent per transaction. Protocol 25 allows an auditor to verify a trade while the asset manager's specific balance and strategy remain dark. Data privacy is only one half of institutional risk management. Asset managers also have to account for the possibility of a compromised smart contract or a hacked node. Protocol 26, the yardstick upgrade, introduced the governed on-chain freeze. As this map shows, if an asset issuer detects a compromise, the network validators instantly quarantine the affected keys, pulling related offers off the order book and isolating the threat. Hard-coding this freeze mechanism into the protocol provides an incident response tool that is more reliable than an application-level security patch. Institutional Capital evaluates several operational trade-offs when choosing a network. This matrix compares Stellar against Solana and Avalanche across settlement speed, compliance, and privacy. Solana offers a throughput advantage at roughly 400 milliseconds, but its compliance features are built as application layer extensions rather than native rules. For risk-averse institutions, relying on extensions rather than the core protocol can introduce vulnerabilities under heavy load. Avalanche uses subnets, custom blockchains that allow banks to set their own rules, but this fragments liquidity into isolated pools. Stellar handles this using protocol-level flags to enforce permissioned access while keeping all assets within a single global liquidity pool. Maintaining all assets on a unified ledger is a more efficient model for complex credit markets than routing transactions through a fragmented subnet architecture. The same low-latency execution and fractional cent transaction fees required for institutional banking also provide the environment needed for autonomous AI agents. AI workflows currently hit a wall when they encounter a paywalled API. The agent cannot proceed because it lacks a way to process a payment without human intervention. The Machine Payments Protocol leverages the HTTP 402 payment required status code. When an agent hits this gateway, it autonomously authorizes a micropayment using USDC on the Stellar network. The gateway turns green, instantly pulling the data. Enabling machines to transact without platform accounts allows the protocol to settle an economy where payments are triggered programmatically by code, not manual clicks. High-throughput technology only attracts large-scale capital if the legal status of the network is clear. That clarity arrived on March 17, 2026, in a joint 68-page interpretive release from the SEC and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. This release explicitly and permanently classified the XLM token as a digital commodity. This enabled traditional managers to file for spot XLM ETFs and allowed custody banks to legally hold the asset on their balance sheets. Because the network was designed with compliance at its core, it remained operational while enforcement actions disrupted several rival projects. On-chain metrics confirm this shift. In the first quarter of 2026, the network processed $5.5 billion in payment volume and saw a 700% surge in smart contract invocations. The contrast between this high financial volume and a moderate number of daily users indicates that Stellar is serving as wholesale enterprise infrastructure. This is visible in Bermuda, where the government is transitioning its national financial systems on-chain to lower transaction costs for its citizens. Native compatibility with the ISO 2022 messaging standard also allows these on-chain assets to communicate directly with legacy clearing systems like SWIFT. By focusing on protocol-level engineering and regulatory alignment, Stellar has moved past the era of retail speculation to become the settlement fabric.
Okay, so that's kind of interesting. I want to take a look because I've never operated natively on Stellar. I've always been, kind of like averse to operating on Stellar because it had something to do with that ISO standard. And whenever I see stuff
Well,
about that ISO standard,
the guy
I
that
think,
started it and built it is he's one of the guys that left Ripple, left XRP, and it's for all intents and purposes, basically a clone of XRP.
oh, great. See, that I knew that there was something that I didn't like about it.
I don't know about now, but initially they were going more after the kind of peer to peer payments, whereas Ripple, of course, was going after the institutional and the cross border payments and things like that.
So here's, it looks like there are some dApps that are on Stellar, and they look to be native to Stellar. So
Mhm.
the way that I know that is, whenever you see, a protocol that says multiple chains, that means that it's not necessarily native to the one chain. But
Mhm.
when you see a protocol on a chain that says just one chain, well, that's a native app. So let's take a look at this one, Blend. I mean, hey, what is this? It's a modular liquidity protocol allowing anyone to create flexible lending markets. And, TVL going up and to the right, that's pretty cool. Let's
I
take a
mean,
look.
RWA.xyz. I mean, XLM is doing quite well.
Yeah, I'm interested to take a look at this. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So this is Blend. This
Yeah,
is
Stellar's number 4 with 1.7 billion. So it's it's definitely it's definitely doing stuff.
yeah, trying to figure out exactly what that stuff is.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, I'm looking over here, and it says okay.
But you always got to go back to the question of the tokenomics. That's the big key.
Yeah, and the tokenomics, it didn't put together research on that, but I'm just curious to see like what's going on because this is the largest money market on Stellar, like decentralized money market. But okay, so what is this fixed pool? Let's take a look at the details of this fixed pool. It says pool backstop. So what is a backstop here? And just taking a look at the assets in the pool, it looks like you've got XLM, you've got USDC, and you've got euros, EURC. So this S must mean supply, B must mean borrow. So 9% to supply USDC. But does that mean that you're exposed to the price of XLM? I'm not quite sure. This is kind of a unique way to structure a pool. And then this is the backstop, it says. I don't know what a backstop is. What is a backstop here on Blend? Backstop APR. What is 37%, 33%? It says Blend USDC LP interest, Blend USDC LP emissions, net interest earned 71%. So is this, it says a fixed pool. I can't quite tell what these are. Are these, it says LP, that tells me that this is a liquidity pool used for swapping. But how do I swap? There's no swap function here. So
I would guess that it's on like another protocol, like that the actual like this is maybe the liquidity base, what manages the liquidity for something else. I'm just guessing.
I'm stuck guessing too because this is not immediately clear what this is, which is stupid. Like UI UX is super important in retail facing DeFi protocols. And if you can't figure out exactly what this is just by taking a look at the data that they present you with quickly, like immediately, then you're not going to use it, you know? So, like if I'm taking a look at this, it looks like a vault, but then when I take a look at the backstop, this looks like a liquidity pool. And those are different things, depending on the protocol that you're talking about. Sometimes they've been merged. Fluid kind of sort of merged those, but there's no AMM, there's no V2 AMM. So I can't quite tell, is this a pool or is this a vault? Is there an AMM or no? So that's going to immediately turn me off to this blend protocol. So yeah, here, this is what it says. Fees, blend pools, total borrow interest accrued across blend version 1 pools. Blend backstop. It says interest paid by blend V2 borrowers that goes to backstop depositors. Blend pools version 2, interest paid by, yeah, so this is, I need to definitely read the documents to understand what this thing is. Let's take a look at Aquarius. And then I want to switch gears and take a look at SUI instead. So it says Aquarius is an AMM. So this is a decentralized exchange. And it says liquidity management layer on Stellar. So let's take a look at this thing. Aquarius. Stellar's DeFi Hub. So Stellar's DeFi Hub has about as much liquidity as a crappy protocol on Ethereum's layer 2s. So let's take a look at this here. You've got incentives. Let's take a look at the pools. So all pools, less than $1 million in volume over the last 24 hours. Okay, you got Solve BTC, so this is a Bitcoin derivative. Looks like the largest pool is a Bitcoin derivative pool. And the total APR, so swap fees, nothing. You're only getting incentives. And what are those incentives paid in, I wonder? They must be, yeah, they're paid in XLM. So if you go through the rigmarole to take your spot Bitcoin, stake it on Solve, and then get on over here to Stellar and take that Solve BTC and pair it with X Solve BTC in one of these what look like V2 liquidity pools. Well, there's no trading volume, so you're not going to earn anything in swap fees, and all you're going to do is earn 5% in XLM. So yeah, lame. So here's PYUSD paired with USDC, and yeah, no swaps here. There's no volume. Let's take a look. Where's the volume? Is there a volume? And it looks like the volume is in XLM, the XLM stablecoin pool. Probably people who want to swap out of XLM for USDC. And so here's some volume. Looks like, but there's no liquidity there. So you see that 100K in TVL, 226K in 24-hour volume, a 0.1% fee tier. So yeah, there's volume here, but for how long, I have no idea. How long that would last, and I don't want to be exposed to XLM. So this 62% is nowhere close to the yield that I would need to be able to earn to make it make sense to be exposed to the volatility of XLM. Yeah, I'm going to pass on XLM. Let's go ahead and take a look at SUI, SUI. So now that I know a little bit about XLM, it looks like a version of XRP, the XRP ledger that actually has some dApps on it. Like the XRP ledger has like no dApps. It looks like XLM Stellar does have a few dApps, but they suck. So let's take a look at SUI, because there's actually some interesting stuff on the SUI protocol.
Can't hear it.
That's so strange how StreamYard does that. I don't know why, even though screen share and volume share is on, I don't know why it does that. So here we go. Let's start this over.
Welcome to The Explainer.
Perfect.
We're going right into what is arguably the most fascinating puzzle in the crypto space right now. If you've been following the Layer 1 wars, you know it's an absolutely ruthless landscape out there. But the situation with SUI in 2026, built by Meiston Labs and this elite crew of former Meta engineers, presents a massive paradox. We've got a network with arguably the absolute best foundational tech in the world, and yet it is actively battling severe market devaluation. So let's unpack exactly what's going on here. Okay, 120,000. Let's just sit with that number for a second. That represents SUI's peak transactions per second, which they hit after rolling out their Mista CD V2 consensus engine late last year. And to be clear, we aren't talking about simple, theoretical, sterile lab tests here. They're consistently processing highly complex, uncorrelated transactions at a scale that honestly makes legacy blockchains look completely obsolete. But here's the catch. With performance that functionally outpaces global payment giants like Visa and MasterCard, you have to ask, how on earth did this ecosystem suffer such a catastrophic contraction? How do you go from a $2.6 billion total value locked peak all the way down to roughly 600 million? That massive plunge sets up the ultimate mystery of 2026. And to solve it, we really need to understand the underlying engine first. Which brings us to Section 1, Unpacking Architectural Supremacy. When you stack SUI's raw metrics up against heavyweights like Ethereum and Solana, it's a blowout. They offer sub 400 millisecond finality. That means a transaction is permanently settled in literally less than half a second. And the fees? Practically zero. They pulled this off using a really clever storage fund model that essentially sets aside a tiny piece of the transaction fee to pay for future data storage. That keeps your execution fees totally predictable even when the network is slammed. It's a brilliant fix for the insane fee spikes you see on other chains. Now, here's where it gets really cool. Sui doesn't use the standard sequential processing that creates bottlenecks on legacy chains. Because it's built on the Move programming language, it treats assets as completely distinct objects. So instead of updating one giant global ledger one line at a time, independent transactions can execute simultaneously without tripping over each other. It's like having a highway where every single car has its own dedicated lane.
Hmm.
But honestly, who cares about mind-bending tech specs if normal people can't figure out how to use it, right? Enter ZK Login. This is a total game changer. It uses zero-knowledge proofs to link your everyday Google or Apple login directly to a blockchain address. Boom. No 24-word seed phrases to lose, no crazy cryptography to understand. It makes the Web3 experience.
So this is actually really, really cool. And I've only, actually, yeah, I don't know if I've only seen this on Sui. It may be also on a bunch of other chains now, but I noticed it first on Sui. There are some businesses that allow you to pay in SUI. And the way that you pay in SUI is by logging in with your Gmail account, which is like really, really cool and makes the user experience seamless. So there's,
Well, I mean, it could be, but the flip side to that is that, your Gmail account gets hacked, it's, is that going to begin,
right.
which.
Yeah, you're right.
Experience feel exactly like Web 2 for the everyday user. And all this frictionless tech is laying the groundwork for something huge, the agentic web. Think about AI agents autonomously running high-frequency tasks and moving capital around without a human ever clicking a button. With tools like Hashi allowing for native Bitcoin collateralization without sketchy bridges, and the Automa network handling tens of thousands of automated agent queries every day, Sui is practically custom-built for the emerging machine economy. All right, section 2, the ecosystem reality check. We need to hit the brakes here and pivot, because despite all that architectural perfection we just talked about, the financial reality hit a brick wall. 75%. That's the devastating contraction in Sui's total value locked. As macro conditions forced everyone to deleverage and those juicy promotional yields and airdrops finally dried up, the mercenary capital simply packed up and vanished. But to be fair, it wasn't just market gravity. It was a brutal string of security failures. You had the massive $223 million Cetus exploit in May of 2025, and a series of smaller hacks after that. But the absolute knockout punch, January 2026. A consensus bug caused validators to disagree, triggering a built-in safety switch that froze the entire network for 6 hours.
That's bad.
$1 billion in value just paralyzed. No funds were stolen, but the reputational damage, staggering.
Yeah.
It stopped their institutional momentum dead in its tracks.
Right, yeah.
Moving into section 3, gaming and institutional adoption. To climb out of that hole, Sui anchored itself into incredibly resilient real-world sectors. It's essentially a barbell strategy. On one side, you have massive, high-speed consumer gaming economies. And on the exact opposite side, you have highly regulated, super risk-averse institutional finance. Let's look at how they're pulling both of these off. On the gaming front, they aren't just pitching white papers anymore. They're shipping real stuff. They literally launched a handheld console, the Sui Play 0x1, blending traditional gaming with seamless native asset integration. Then you've got massive titles like Eve Frontier putting their digital universes on chain, and Exociety, an MMO shooter that cranked through over 15 million transactions just in its beta. They are stress testing this network's multiplayer capacity in real time. At the exact same time, the TradFi heavyweights are quietly moving in. Fireblocks integrated Sui for institutional custody, and Matrix Stock launched a fully backed institutional silver token natively on the chain. But here is the most telling part. Sugig, a public company, pulled their 108 million tokens out of those risky DeFi lending apps and staked them directly on the base layer. They are treating Sui as a hyper-secure settlement layer, prioritizing rock-solid consensus over chasing yield. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Section 4, the tokenomics gravity problem. Look, the tech is phenomenal. The adoption is actually happening, but the tokenomics? That's the real villain of this story.
Right.
Think of Sui like a fully tuned Formula One car.
So high FDV, low float, VCs, not good.
That's trying to race with the parking brake permanently yanked up. A massive 60% of the token supply is locked up for early VCs and the team. This creates this looming ghost valuation over the market, acting as a massive structural ceiling because everyone is constantly pricing in the future dilution. The sheer volume of these monthly emissions is relentless. We are talking about tens of millions of new tokens hitting the open market every single month, 74 million in May alone. This structural inflation is the exact gravity dragging their price down 80% from its all-time high. It doesn't matter how many incredible tech upgrades they ship. This tidal wave of new supply completely neutralizes the positive price action.
Right.
Now, the one saving grace keeping this from being a total collapse is the staking ratio. Nearly 75% of eligible tokens are actively staked to secure the network. That removes roughly 3 billion SUI from liquid circulation, creating a massive, absolutely critical buffer against these VC sell-offs. Without that buffer, the inflation would have been catastrophic. But even if they manage the inflation, there's another existential puzzle here: developers. Now, within its own niche, Sui is dominating. They absolutely crush their direct move language rival, Aptos, boasting almost double the monthly active developers. But the real threat isn't Aptos. The real threat is Monad. While Sui objectively has better throughput and a safer programming environment, Monad offers global Ethereum developers completely frictionless code porting. Actually, think about it. If you're a developer, the switching costs of having to learn Sui's totally unique move language are incredibly steep. Meanwhile, you can deploy your existing Solidity code onto Monad instantly. And right now, Monad is rapidly vacuuming up the exact DeFi liquidity Sui is desperate to capture.
Hmm.
Finally, Section 5, Survival in a Compliant Era. To survive everything we've just talked about, Miston Labs has completely ripped up their old playbook. In 2026, with the EU's MiCA regulations and the US Genius Act bringing in strict legal liabilities, compliance isn't just a box to check, it's literal survival. They actually elevated their former chief legal officer, Kevin Boone, to the role of president. That tells you everything you need to know. Navigating the law is now just as critical as writing the code. Plus, they deployed a $50 million fund, not just giving away free tokens, but strategically incubating highly secure, compliant DeFi protocols. And they are baking this compliance right into the base layer through something called programmable privacy. This isn't like the old privacy coins like Monero that get delisted from exchanges for being totally anonymous. Sui's native confidential transactions allow enterprise developers to perfectly protect sensitive corporate data while still satisfying strict KYC and regulatory audits. It's a massive win for institutional adoption. So as we wrap up this explainer, it all comes down to this one provocative question: can they outrun their own tokenomics? The speed is unmatched, the traditional finance integrations are huge, and the architecture is, quite frankly, brilliant. But are those technological triumphs going to be enough to overcome the massive, heavy burden of a relentless token unlock schedule? That is the defining paradox of Sui in 2026. And if you're following this space, it's something you absolutely have to keep your eye on. Thanks for diving into the data with me today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.
Okay, so can Sui outrun its own tokenomics? That's the question. I think the answer is probably, but not likely anyway, not for many years, because you got to get through that unlock cliff first. So if we take a look at SUI, let's see if I can find it. So number 13 by TVL, 630 million. Look at that TVL collapse from 2 billion, 2.6 billion to 630 million, perking up. I think this rolls back over again. If we take a look at some of the protocols, you've got Navi and SuiLend, number 1 and number 2. These are both money markets. UI, UX on these protocols is not the best, in my opinion. You've got Bluefin. I think that this is like a perp stacks. I'm pretty sure this is a perp stacks.
It's an exchange. It is.
Yeah. And then you got Bucket Protocol. Let's see, collateralized debt. Okay. And what else you got? Haydoll. What is Haydoll? Oh, this is staking. Got it. An LST protocol. And then you got, so Cetus was hacked, and it was a big hack.
Yeah.
And And then you got Scallop, which is another money market. I actually kind of preferred the UI UX of Scallop to Navi and SuiLend when I was operating on Sui. AlphaFi, this is some like derivatives protocol. Um, DeepBook is a DEX. And let's see, anything else? Momentum, another DEX. So there are some interesting DEXs on Sui. I got to say, there really are. But yeah, would need to spend a little bit more time really digging into those protocols. It's been maybe a year since I've really operated on Sui. But interesting protocol, no doubt. And probably makes sense to get some exposure to Sui if it sells off to the level where I want to buy it, which is down here at like 35 cents. So for me, when I'm taking a look at SUI, if I could pick up some SUI down here at 30, 37 cents, something like that, I'd buy it down there, or even below 37 cents. But I wouldn't buy it prior to it getting down there. So at least that's what I think. I think that this move last week out of Sui was a dead cat bounce. And if or when it rolls over and continues to the downside, I think it's got some support at 37 cents. So that would be, a move of an additional 70% to the downside. So yeah, but I would definitely buy some down there. So yeah, that's what I had for all of us today, Mike. In terms of our research, we took a look at Avalanche, we took a look at Stellar, and then we took a look at SUI. And I think over the next couple of months, we'll hopefully be able to get through like all of the top 300. That would be pretty cool, because we're basically sitting at like we've gotten through like the top 30 or 35. But yeah, to be able to get through the top 300, dude, we're going to know more about the crypto and DeFi ecosystem than 99.99% of people out there, just because of all this deep dive research. Imagine we put out deep dive research on the top 300. We're going to know a hell of a lot more than most other people.
And that's the key, is to understand, what you're investing in. It's going to, save you from making costly mistakes. So with that, if you want to come over to the node, the node.pro is our official website, and you can find, everything there. You can find, when our shows are on. You can find, because we have multiple live shows a day. You can find our newsletter. You can find the coaching. You can find the merch store. You can find, the community. Most of this, and DeFi most of it is no cost. So by all means, please take advantage of this. It's David and all of us here went through a lot of trouble to be able to provide this, the content that we make daily. All of this is at no cost to you. So if you could, please like, follow, and share. It helps us grow the channel. It helps us get good solid no hype information out there. We are not incentivized to talk about any of these projects. Every one of these projects that we talk about, it's at no point are we paid in any way to paint a positive or negative picture about any of them. It gives us the integrity to be able to speak honestly about each of them. So if you could, at a minimum, like, follow, and share. And also, if you want to join us later today, we have immediately, right now, we have the blockchain report where Jeff, it's a pre-record. He's talking about a new project. He's always doing deep dives. And the daily market wrap is later today with David, with one of his live calls if you're part of that paid service, and potentially tonight, Gaming and Chill. So tomorrow, I will be hosting the Node Show solo. I'll probably only do an hour. David's going to be traveling with Jeff, not together, but they're going to be traveling, up here to come visit. And tomorrow evening, we will be doing a Red Pill show. All three of us sitting on the couch behind me. So looking forward to that. Going to have some, have some good times over the weekend. And welcome all of you to join us. So until next time, Veteran Crypto out.
Peace.